So, when we moved from the Commission to the Council, we also adopted a decision to have a new procedure called the Universal Periodic Review. The resolution that brought this decision into being, into force, said that Universal Periodic Review, I'm going to call it UPR from now on, UPR is the fulfillment by each state of its human rights obligations and commitments, a cooperative mechanism based on an interactive dialogue. It sounds pretty good, the fulfillment of every state of all its human rights obligations and commitments. Who would be against that? That seems a great idea. So the objectives of Universal Periodic Review, UPR, is first of all to assess positive developments, but also challenges. So it wants to be balanced. It will assess the fulfillment of each member state of the United Nations, of its obligations and commitments in the field of human rights. It can share good practice because all the states will be reviewed and therefore they can learn from each other and share experiences about, let's say, the challenge of racism. Especially, we see around us how austerity seems to have given rise to a push to the right. And with that, unfortunately, we see in many states more racist organizations gathering support and becoming more vocal. So this is a shared challenge at the global level. It rears its ugly head all too often. And, states can really share with each other that, whilst respecting privacy, whilst respecting freedom of opinion or expression, how do you deal with the scourge of racism? When the state lacks capacity, money, and expertise to improve its human rights situation, and we're not talking about only civil and political rights, but also economic, social, and cultural rights. So social benefits, training for employment, child literacy, maternal health, etc., all these require expertise, require money, and in many states where this experience and financial ability or infrastructure is lacking. I mean, in all human rights, if you want to track developments, you need detailed statistics. And gathering detailed statistics and disaggregating them according to age, so distinguishing. So let's look at literacy. We need to know the male and female. We need to know the minority populations. We need to know the border regions. We need to know the deprived areas. We need to know how illiteracy breaks down according to boys and girls, according to different age groups. That requires some expertise. And UPR, along with welcoming positive developments and raising issues of concern, is also able to offer technical assistance to the state if that indeed is the reason why there hasn't been an improvement in the human rights situation on the ground. So it's quite a well-rounded package within that mechanism. Now, this is the first time we have mobilized a procedure that looks at the human rights situation of all 193 members of the UN on an equal basis. It gives them exactly the same allocation of funding, time, and the examination is on exactly the same basis. Exactly the same pattern is used for a country of 1.3 billion population or a country of, let's say, 300,000 population. Seems bizarre, but on the other hand, if we're living in a world of sovereign states, all states are equal, therefore they have equal obligation and should be equally responsive to their obligations and commitments in the field of human rights. So if we look at it in terms of sovereign equality, then it's quite right that they should be treated equally, even though if you were looking at it in terms of population, it seems bizarre to give exactly the same attention to 1.3 billion as a few 100,000. But the system as we have it is each of the 193 member states will be reviewed every 4 years. That means around 48 states per year. The aim for it is not to surprise the state and just launch into criticism. It's a cooperative mechanism. It should be based on reliable information. So the information has been sifted, it's been summarized into a standard format. It's an intergovernmental process, so primarily, one state is under review and other states are making recommendations to it. And the state which is under review is fully involved. So if you're concerned with the universal enjoyment of human rights, if you are concerned with the advocacy for human rights, you might have your favorites: human right, freedom of expression, freedom of religion or belief, the right to education, etc., etc. If you are concerned with the domestic impact of international commitments or have concerns about particular violations, then UPR is one procedure that gives us a very broad assessment about human rights situations in all 193 states every 4 years. Now, I said that the pattern being used for assessment is identical. So is the basis. I mean, on what basis are you going to review Brazil and Monaco, Liechtenstein and the People's Republic of China? Well, on exactly the same basis. So it's on the basis of the UN Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all the human rights treaties that the state has ratified. Because if it's not ratified them, it's not bound by them. That's the legality comes from the ratification. Any additional voluntary commitments and pledges, and taking note of applicable international humanitarian law. So if there are situations of conflict, then that body of law is also applied.